Hey everybody, this is Eno and welcome. Today I thought I'd talk a little bit about caliber. Now I typically don't get involved in the whole caliber debate, and the reason why is because I think it's pointless. Whatever you choose to shoot and what caliber you choose to go with, and I hope you have many different guns and many different calibers, and that's all good. It doesn't matter. As gun enthusiasts and gun collectors, we exercise our Second Amendment right to own the guns that we want to own and shoot the guns we want to shoot and shoot the ammo we want to shoot. And that's all fine. And we might make decisions for personal carry, personal defense, concealed carry, things like that, for a variety of different reasons. And whatever you're comfortable with and whatever you can shoot well with and control, that's what the ammunition and the gun that's right for you. That's very much a personal decision. But I thought I'd take a moment and look at the FBI's decision to return the agency to 9mm ammunition. A report was issued earlier this year to announce the decision and to give the justification, both sort of their argument and also the science behind their decision, in the form of a report. And in addition to that report, they issued what they called the Summary of Justification to Law Enforcement Partners. So not only did they release the report announcing their decision and why they made it, but they're also advocating other law enforcement agencies make the same decision. And I thought it was very interesting to read through the summary. It's not too long, and to kind of look at the basic points that they're calling out of why they consider 9mm to be a superior ammunition and moving the entire agency back to 9mm after almost 30 years of using 40 Smith & Wesson. Now, the backdrop to this is that the military is looking at doing the exact opposite thing. The military is looking at replacing the 9mm Beretta M9 and going with a larger caliber. However, I think that whole issue has to be taken with a grain of salt. The U.S. military just recently signed a new 5-year contract with Beretta to continue to produce the M9. Just this year, the military has placed over $100 million worth of government contracts for accessories for the Beretta M9, holsters and things like that. So I don't think we're going to see a decision anytime soon come out of the military in their multi-service handgun program. I think the program will continue. I think they'll continue to evaluate different systems, but I don't think we're going to see a decision there anytime soon. But it certainly is something that I myself, and I'm sure all of you, are going to very closely watch. So let's get back to the FBI's justification for law enforcement partners and their decision to use the 9mm ammunition. Just to give you a little bit of a background, in the mid-'80s, the FBI went through a transition when they decided that they needed a bigger, more powerful ammunition to issue to their FBI enforcement officers. And a lot of that had to do with the Miami shootout debacle of 1986, where a number of FBI agents were killed and a number of others were wounded in a shootout where they were just utterly outgunned by two individuals. One of them had a Ruger Mini 14. And because of that, they concluded that they needed a more potent handgun round. From that, they developed the 10mm round. Bigger, more powerful than the 9mm round, but still gave you the capacity, a little higher capacity that they were looking for. What they realized with the 10mm, and actually they were in the process of adopting it, is that it was difficult for a lot of their agents to control. And qualification scores dropped dramatically when they began adopting the 10mm. So they began working with different types of sort of toned down 10mm ammunition, which was widely considered to be what we call 10mm light. Or 10mm diet. And those were different calibers that they were toying with at the time too. This eventually turned into Smith & Wesson, along with a few other manufacturers, developing the 40 Smith & Wesson, 40 caliber Smith & Wesson round, and that's this one right here. Basically, it's a toned down 10mm round. Gives you a little bit better control than what the FBI was seeing with 10mm. They never really considered, to any great extent, the 45 ACP. For about the last 30 years, the FBI has used the 40 Smith & Wesson, and law enforcement agencies all over the country have adopted the 40 Smith & Wesson. Many use 9, many use 40 Smith & Wesson. So it's interesting that the FBI, who really sort of was at the forefront of moving to a larger caliber, is now making the decision to step back, go back to the 9mm. So let's go through some of the reasons. First of all, I'm kind of going point by point on the summary of the decision. The FBI states that the caliber debate has existed in law enforcement for decades. Once they went from 9 to a bigger caliber, the debate continued. Once they've adopted a bigger caliber, the debate continued, and the debate still continues. What's the best round? What's the most powerful? Which has the most knockdown power? All that sort of BS. And it has been a big debate from a lot of different people, a lot of different walks of life, and a lot of different agencies that kind of weigh in here. They point out that most of what is common knowledge with ammunition and its effects on human targets are rooted in myth and folklore. So it's a lot of, I knew a guy who talked to a guy who met a guy kind of a thing. That most people are not giving you advice on ammunition based on real world or scientific experience. They're giving you advice based on their own assumptions, their own interpretations of meaningless information about the different rounds, and not really placing good solid experience and good solid science, practical science behind their decisions. It's a lot of myth, it's a lot of folklore, it's a lot of opinions. Number 3, projectiles are what ultimately wound our adversaries, and needs to be the basis for the discussion on what caliber is best. So the actual projectile itself is what's really important. And what this projectile does and where it goes is, in the end, irregardless of the size of the projectile, the most important thing. In all major law enforcement calibers, and this would be 9mm, 357 SIG, 40 Smith & Wesson, and 45 ACP. Those are the 4 law enforcement calibers. There exist projectiles that have a high likelihood of failure in a shooting incident, and there are projectiles that have a high likelihood of succeeding in a shooting incident. So in other words, what they're saying is to make the blanket point or opinion that 45 ACP is a superior round to 9mm is a bullshit statement. You can have 9mm rounds which are far superior. You can have 45 rounds that are far superior. You can have 40 rounds that are far superior. And you can have 45 rounds that are a piece of junk. And you can have 40 rounds that are a piece of junk. And you can have 9mm rounds that are a piece of junk. You're going to be all over the map. So to make a blanket statement that a single caliber across the board is better is completely missing the point. And that is that how the projectile performs, what's called terminal effectiveness, is what's important, not the size of the bullet. Because I can give you a really crappy 45 ACP round, and you're not going to do the type of damage you want to do with it. So there are, in each caliber that they're looking at, there's some rounds that work really well, and some rounds that don't, across the board. Okay? The next point they make is that stopping power is a myth. Doesn't exist. There's no quantifiable way to really define stopping power and really prescribe that in a way that has a real world application. Okay? Stopping power. What is it? How do you achieve it? What is the threshold? I would argue it's not even consistent. You can't establish a threshold. What puts one man down won't put another man down. Some guys will get shot in the arm by a 9mm round, and just the psychology of being shot, they're done. They're down. No, I don't want to get shot anymore. Other people, you can pump them full of lead, and they'll keep coming. Drugs and alcohol have a lot to do with it. Knockdown power is simply a myth. Okay, some people can sustain devastating injuries in a gunfight and still continue on, and the Miami shootout in 1986 is a good example of that. The single most important factor in effectively wounding a human target is to have penetration to a scientifically valid depth, which is 12 to 18 inches. And what the FBI is saying there is the only factor, the most important factor, is how deep the bullet goes. And as long as you can achieve a scientifically proven valid depth, of 12 to 18 inches, it doesn't matter what caliber you're using, okay? You'll be just as effective with each one of these if you achieve shot placement and a scientifically proven depth of 12 to 18 inches. What does that mean? That basically means that they have proven in their scientific research that if you achieve that type of penetration in the proper shot placement, you are going to achieve the result in the shootout situation that you're looking for. So things are going to go your way. If you place a round on target, appropriately placed, and get 12 to 18 inches of penetration, regardless of what caliber you're using. Okay? So the next is that law enforcement officers miss between 70 and 80% of their shots. And these are FBI and law enforcement officers. These are trained individuals, people who practice routinely and have to go through qualifying routinely and usually annually to keep up their certifications, if you will, with their handguns. So these are fairly highly trained individuals with handguns, and in shootout situations will miss 70 to 80% of their shots. So shot placement is the absolute most important thing. And also capacity becomes very important too. If you're missing 70 to 80% of your 70 to 80% of your shots in a stressed shootout situation, the more bullets you have in your gun, the better. And again, the only thing that's really important from a wounding standpoint is, besides that shot placement, is going to be that effective depth of 12 to 18 inches. This is a very interesting point that the FBI makes here. Projectiles since 2007 have dramatically increased the terminal effectiveness of many premium line law enforcement rounds, with an emphasis on 9mm. 9mm now offer select projectiles which are, under identical testing conditions, outperforming most of the premium line 40 Smith & Wesson and 45 ACP projectiles tested by the FBI. Okay, let's unpack that. What they're saying is that 30 years ago, this is not your grandpa's 9mm. 30 years ago, when they made the decision to move away from 9mm, the 9mm that they tested then is a much different performing round than the 9mm they're testing today. And that the improvements and the technological advancements and the reliability advancements and all the good, cool things that have happened in the world of ammunition over the last 30 years has disproportionately benefited the 9mm. That the 9mm has seen the greatest amount of increase in performance over all other ammunitions. Now you could say, well, you know, if they've been able to dramatically increase the effectiveness and the reliability and the performance of the 9mm over the last 30 years, then they've been able to do it to these rounds too, right? Well, actually, no. It has disproportionately benefited 9mm. And why is that? It's because 9mm is the most popular round. If you're going to concentrate on, you know, a new propellant, a new projectile, new materials, you know, new way of doing things, new production techniques, however you're going to make your product, you're going to concentrate that on your best opportunity for sales. And because the 9mm round is the most popular round in the world, that has disproportionately affected the performance of 9mm. 9mm, under their testing conditions in the FBI, outperformed all other premium line Smith & Wesson and 40 Smith & Wesson and 45 ACP rounds. Again, we're talking premium round. We're not talking, you know, target loads here. When you take a look at premium 45, premium 40, premium 9mm is outperforming them in every testing condition across the board. And so from their standpoint, there's absolutely no drawback to going with 9mm. You're not sacrificing anything. The next point that the FBI makes is 9mm offers higher magazine capacities, less recoil, lower cost both in the ammo itself and in the wear and tear on the weapon, and a higher functional reliability rates. One of the issues that the FBI was having with 40 Smith & Wesson was the wear and tear on the guns. They were breaking a lot more guns, and this is explained more if you look at the full kind of in-depth analysis of their decision. Again, we're just looking at the summary. They were seeing much higher failure rates of the guns, broken frames, stuff like that. And they were also seeing wear and tear, shooting out the barrel and things like that happening at a much more rapid pace with the 40 Smith & Wesson than they were with 9mm or with 45 ACP. So not only is the cost of the ammunition less, but the later maintenance and wear and tear on the guns is a lot less with 9mm than it is with 40 Smith & Wesson. And if you're talking about yourself at home, making whatever decision you want to make for whatever ammo you want to shoot, and whatever decision you make is fine. I have no problem with that. But when you're looking at an agency-wide decision, and you're looking at something being a far lower cost and far better for your equipment, then it becomes a fairly easy decision. Made even easier by the previous premise, which that the 9mm is outperforming 40 and 45 across the board in all testable situations that the FBI did. So it's a win-win. The next point, the majority of FBI shooters are both faster in their shot strings and more accurate with 9mm versus 40 Smith & Wesson. So when they actually did practical testing, how do people shoot with 40, how do people shoot with 9mm, they were finding people were more accurate and firing more rapidly with 9mm in a shootout situation than they were with 40 Smith & Wesson. And this is not range testing that they're doing. Okay, there was a lot of range testing. These are actual training simulations that they're doing with both of these calibers. Okay, so they're not just sitting two people on a range and seeing how they do. There is little to no noticeable difference in the wound tracks between premium line law enforcement ammunition projectiles from 9mm to 45 ACP. What this means is that if you get shot with a bullet and you get carted off to the hospital, the doctors there will not be able to identify the size caliber that you were shot with between 9mm and 45 ACP based specifically on wound tracks, entrance wound, exit wound, these types of things. The amount of tissue damage, they all across the board can all mimic each other. You can have some 9mm that will just absolutely wreak havoc. You can have 45 ACPs that don't do nearly as much damage. Again, it depends on the quality of the ammunition that you're using. Okay? But from a standpoint of wound track, there is no discernible difference between 9mm and 45 ACP. So if you get all premium line ammunition, you're not going to be able to tell the difference by simply looking at the wound track. Again, because we have established a range of 12 to 18 inches, and if you look at some of the testing that they've done, you really can't tell a lot of difference between the wound track. Given the contemporary bullet construction, law enforcement officers can field 9mm with all of the terminal performance potential of any other law enforcement pistol caliber, with none of the disadvantage of larger calibers. That's a big statement. And let that one sink in for a little while. Given the modern 9mm round, performance line law enforcement round, that is outperforming the bigger calibers, gives you all the performance and terminal potential of all the other rounds with none of the drawbacks, which means increased recoil and decreased capacity. So that's a big statement. So I'm not sitting here saying that you should buy 9mm, and I'm not sitting here saying that 9mm is the only ammunition that you should buy. You can make your own decisions based on what's comfortable for you and what you like to shoot and what you're comfortable and effective in shooting. And what works for one person doesn't work for another. But this is an example of a large law enforcement agency making and advocating and doing a lot of testing and finding that the 9mm cartridge is the superior cartridge. Now, of course, we're going to watch closely and see what the military does. Take it easy.